but it's incredibly dangerous.
How's it eating all that stuff?
What even is it?
Thank you for choosing
Pull to open.
Pull to open?
Yes, and what do you do?
It can digest pretty much whatever it wants by the looks of things.
I don't fancy its chances.
Yeah?
We know you have a choice of vid briefings concerning the most threatening.
Sorry, here we go.
Here come the drums!
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch every single story in the television show known as Doctor Who in completely random order. My name, non-randomly, is Chris Taylor.
My name's Pete Paschal. Chris and I were a couple of writers, intense fans, occasional journalists who've been addicted to Doctor Who for many, many years, perhaps decades. We occasionally write about the show, and we always have a lot to say about it.
Yes, and here's what we've had to say in our random adventure so far. 3 episodes ago, we were in the lost William Hartnell story, The Smugglers, which is about to be animated, allegedly. I don't think we've heard any more news about that, but still, we had a somewhat mixed time in The Smugglers, and then we rocketed forward to Tom Baker and had a really mixed time in The Invasion of Time on Gallifrey. And then last time, along with our special guest, Dave Kitchen, from the Doctor Who show, we went to visit the Doctor's wife in the Matt Smith era and had a final time. Some of us finer than others, but yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yeah, it was our first 3-way split with a guest in terms of our ratings.
And our first guest with a fixed point in time.
Yeah.
A brand new rating in the Pull to Open rating system. And then Dave graciously agreed to stand at the controls of the randomizer. And where did he bring us? He brought us to the new show, the Jodie Whittaker era, Series 11, Episode 5, the Tsuranga Conundrum. I'm pronouncing that correctly, right? Tsuranga.
I don't even know anymore.
Tsuranga. So right, it's wronger.
Why? What is the obsession with T's in this one? Because there's the monster, right? Which is like the Pting.
Yeah.
Why is everything hard to pronounce in the future?
Yes, it's also the same scene as Sim Shaw, right? Tim
right,
Shaw.
that same season.
That's a TS situation.
We will call it a troubled season as far as pronunciations go.
A troubled season of pronunciations.
Troubled
season from Chris Chibnall. The P is silent. But yes, before we start, if you want to go straight to the comedy on the Tsuranga Conundrum.
The comedy?
Our comedy commentary, which it kind of will be, already is. If you want to cut straight to the comedy, check the show notes, and we've given you the exact time to fast forward to. If you don't feel like being in the feedback loop, but hey, we kind of like splashing around in the shallow end of the feedback loop for a little bit. So, Pete, what have we got this week?
The feedback loop has begun. So, listeners, if you enjoy Pull to Open, our world-renowned reviews on Doctor Who episodes are heavily populated TikTok channel, which you should definitely check out. Pull to Open on TikTok. Or our emoji title brain teasers. We'd like to ask you right now, pause the playback of this podcast just for a second, and please leave a review or a rating in whatever podcast app you may be listening in. Reviews really do help the show, and we also sometimes like to read your review out on air. So the only way to better show your appreciation for this show is to share the podcast with a friend. Surely you know someone in your life who likes science fiction, who may like Doctor Who, and they may not be aware of Pull to Open. Tap them on the shoulder with a text, with a tweet, with whatever you use to virtually ping someone or pting them, perhaps. And
Nice.
let them know that this is here for them. We're waiting for them.
Tell them there's a sign they've been walking past for 700 years. What's it say? It says Pull to Open.
Perfect.
Anyway, yes, we have our Whomoji game, as we dubbed it last week. When you send in your Whomoji review, you send in the title of a story merely in emoji form. And that might be emoji that represents the title. It might be emoji that represents the content. But that's how we do it. We stick that in our codex, our list of Doctor Who stories. You too can be part of the codex forever, for all time, with your Whomoji reviews. And
we have one now.
We have one. It's time for me to be stumped again by the Whomoji.
Chris, our only contestant this week.
Yeah, that's right.
Last week we had 2, and so the reigning champion, Dave Kitchen, could not return. So
that's right.
Defaults back to you, Chris.
He's walked away with his Whomoji trophy.
But we have a brain teaser, a Doctor Who story the title in the form of an emoji. And this one comes from Rowan. This is actually rounding out his contributions from a review a few weeks ago, where he gave us a whole bunch. You'll be pleased to know we'll have more on the way. Another old friend of the pod has just given us filled up our reserves. Our reservoir of emoji titles keeps coming.
It was about to run dry, so thank you. Thank you for filling it.
So, are you ready, sir? For the emoji challenge.
As I will ever be. As you know, people describe the emoji to me, so that's one source of brain power lost as I try to visualize these particular emoji. And then I have to come up with what out of the 300-odd story titles of Doctor Who this could be. So, I mean, that's quite a challenge. This is some serious mental Olympics right here.
I know. We got to figure out some way we can feed you the actual emojis live.
Yeah.
At some point, we'll figure that out.
Yes, that'd be a nice visual component.
But today I'm just going to have to describe them. So I'm tapping into sort of all of my Shakespearean powers as of language. And
is this an emoji I see before me?
All right. Here it is. It is 3 emojis. First emoji, cardboard box.
Okay.
Second emoji, robot. Third emoji, explosion.
Okay. There's a lot of Doctor Who that could be. A robot in a box with an explosion. Is it just robots? I'm going for the easy ones.
There's no episode called Robots.
No, robot singular. The first Tom Baker story.
Oh, robot.
Robot.
It is not robot.
Robot in a box. Mad robot in a box. Mad robot exploding in a box. Wow. No, I feel like I'm going to need a hint on this one.
Okay. First hint. Boxes for most folks today tend to come.
Oh, is it Kablam? Is it Kablam?
It's Kablam!
Yes! You didn't even need to say Amazon.
I was going to say, wasn't sure what to say. Come from a company. And it was that kind of gives it away.
We were about to get some sponsorship from Amazon, and then they somehow refused to sponsor us. So, we didn't actually mention their name on the air, except we have now. So, Amazon, call us.
Sweet. All right, way to go. You've won this week's Whomoji challenge with only one hint. So we'll keep track of this. One hint. I'm writing it down. But success.
I was actually thinking of Kablam, but I thought that I was sort of, my thinking is kind of mired in the Whittaker era, given where we are right now.
Exactly.
So I didn't want to be Whittaker biased, but turns out I should have been.
You too, listener, can have your Whomoji challenge emoji title read out on air, of course. Just leave them in as a review, or ping us on Twitter at PullToOpen63, or wherever you find us on the socials, which are in many places, such as Instagram, also PullToOpen63, and Facebook, also PullToOpen63. One other place you can actually find us is YouTube, and we are at youtube.com/PullToOpen. That's also a great place to leave an emoji title or a comment. Plus, you can see us. You can see all these fun things we have in the background. You can see my Whittaker-themed background today. And we also get some great comments on YouTube. There's good discussion there. And I would love to highlight one of our commenters on YouTube this week. So a gentleman named Jeffrey Baker had a comment about our companion verification system. So you might recall a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago now, we went public with our companion verification system. This is answering the age-old question in Doctor Who really counts as a companion? You have certainly clear companions like Tegan, like Leela, like Rose, but there are lots of people who are only in the TARDIS for a short period of time, only there for a story or two, but do companion-y stuff. So once you get to these edge cases, you start to sort of think, well, wait a minute, what is a companion and what isn't? And everyone seems to have a different answer. We have now a system that I think people can get behind as, like having awarding points for various things that you do with the Doctor to achieve a certain amount. In our case, it's 10 to count as a companion. Yeah, exactly. It's just like the DMV, guys. Just like when you go there and you have different ID.
We know you love to think about the DMV, so
so
do it in a Doctor Who context. Jeffrey
Baker had some comments and brought up a couple of interesting edge cases. So here we go. He says, interesting discussion. RTD seems to explicitly want to disrupt this idea of companionship, even from his first season with the introduction of Adam as the companion who doesn't work. People might recall, Adam does not make the cut in our system.
Mostly 9 points.
Yeah, 9 points. He's just one shy.
Because it's that -6 you get from working against the Doctor.
So Jeffrey brings up two other edge cases we had not considered. One, Wilfred Mott, unfortunately, does not classify with this system. He's in more than one story, 4. Name in the credits, 4. And so he gets 8. One could argue that Donna invites him, but either way, he doesn't accept. Plus, he is the one who knocks 4 times, so maybe there's a -6 there, too. I think that's a little harsh. I mean, he's just trying to live, man.
Yeah, exactly. That's how many times he knocks. How many times do you knock on a door? Poor guy.
Yeah, but that's interesting. He gets 8. And then he also brings up a later or earlier addition to the Brigadier's family is Mark Gatiss' character in Twice Upon a Time as Archibald Hamish Lethbridge Stewart. He travels in space. He takes a trip in the TARDIS, in other words. He travels in time, and he has his name in the credits. Yep. So he makes the cut.
Yeah, he makes the cut perhaps more than the Brigadier did, or certainly faster than the Brigadier did. Yeah, it's an interesting case, isn't it? Because we talked about Liz Shaw last week, and we noted that we have to figure out how she makes the cut because it's our point system is very TARDIS centric.
Right.
But the thing is, I mean, okay, unless we're going to cheat here and give Bernard Cribbins extra points for having traveled in the TARDIS during the Peter Cushing movies, I think, you got to say under our system, Wilfred doesn't make the cut. Well, obviously, Wilf is hugely important. So maybe it's this whole thing of like, why are we only talking about companions, right? Why is there only one sort of? I know the Doctor has a very flat team structure, but like you can have in any organization you have titles other than just the one title, other than companion, right?
Right.
So I don't know what it is. Like, Liz Shaw and Wilf seem to be at top of mind for sort of Earth-based companions, as it were, or I don't know what we call them, FODs, Friends of the Doctor.
Right. Yeah.
It's something that's not necessarily any less than. And then thus our point system could be for basically TARDIS space companions, which is kind of a different genre.
No, but I think your point's great in that we kind of need another word.
Yeah.
And whether it is companions are thus a subset of that word, or it's something else that is sort of adjacent to it. Yeah, you need I think the only word I can think of is friend.
Yeah,
friend of the Doctor.
Solid title, Friend of the Doctor. Definitely doesn't downplay it in any way. But it is like that. There are these characters who basically their home is Earth. They do not live on the TARDIS at any point, but they are super important to the Doctor and the adventures. Super essential, super beloved, as Wilf is. R.I.P. Bernard Cribbins. And I really think that there needs to be this sort of just essential division between the two sides of the Doctor's Earth friends, the ones that actually go traveling with him, and the ones who just sort of stick around and refuse the adventure, but are still super important anytime he visits Earth, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it just occurred to me, maybe one of there might be another criteria we add to the system, which is, do you have a room in the TARDIS?
Yeah.
That gives you a huge number of points.
Yes, indeed. But we'll never know whether Jack actually does or not. That was left deliberately vague. I seem to remember in Revolution of the Daleks.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to that. I can't see how we couldn't. Because in between, we can get there later. But I mean, in between the Doctor dances in Boomtown, it just seems like so much time has passed. But we'll get back to that at some point. Thank you, Jeffrey, for your great comment. Always good to get more feedback on our companion system. Go check out that podcast or YouTube video when you have a second. But moving on in the feedback loop, Spotify listeners, this is your reminder that there is even more ways to interact with the show. You can, first of all, rate the show in your mobile app. You can give us a star rating anytime you want. You don't even have to pause the playback. I'm sure that would not take much time. But every week, Chris and I, as everyone knows, give a rating, a Pull to Open rating, to the Doctor Who story that we're talking about. Whether it's a Ogron, a Dalek, a Viscount Banger, explanations for all those, of course, at the end of the show. But you too, listener, can give your rating for whatever episode we're talking about. You can just go to your Spotify app, and through the poll function, you can choose one of our 5 ratings, and we will announce the results in a future episode. And I will do that now for the Invasion of Time. So the Invasion of Time, second excursion to Gallifrey for Tom Baker's 4th Doctor. Chris and I had a split decision on that one. I had very fond, not just fond memories of it, but I think structurally really held up. I called it a Dalek. Chris was not as enthusiastic, shall we say? You had a little bit of you had a bit of some issues with.
I went with Professor Hater in the end, right?
You did,
yeah.
So the fans have spoken. And I'm sorry, I win again. It's a Dalek.
So I see. Yeah. We've even got some ratings for a Viscount Banger here.
Yeah.
Some people really like it.
Some people were super into it. I think it's going a little far.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised. Maybe for some people, anything on Gallifrey is like just automatic banger. Like, yes, I'm getting backstory. Finally, I'm getting history on the Doctor's planet. I'm getting some idea of it.
And you get those abandoned hospital corridors in the TARDIS, which I think if for some people might think that subversion of expectations is super amazing. Like it's just this old warehouse. Okay. That's fine.
It's a hospital for people with mental health issues, especially, which does seem appropriate for the TARDIS at
True.
times. It is a madman in a box. So yeah,
occasionally
I can see that. I can see that, and I'm fully admit that part of my problem with the Invasion of Time is I did have, I was one of those kids who read the episode summaries. Of course, growing up in the UK, we didn't get repeats, so I just had to imagine it in my own head, and just sort of on and off over the years as a Doctor Who fan, anytime Invasion of Time comes up, I hadn't seen it before, hadn't gotten around to seeing it at all until this podcast. I had grand visions of the Sontarans in the TARDIS, and was just very surprised with what we ended up with. It is all about where your expectations start. So I can see a lot of people kind of coming to this completely not knowing anything that happens.
Speaking of Sontarans and TARDISes, I think if you have fond memories of this, you might have been seared by the moment where he slips on the deck chairs. And I think Doctor Who as education is really working here, because you really learn, don't run next to a pool. And so a kid's watching, that's probably like, yep, I feel you definitely don't want to run. Bad idea, Sontarans. That's one to grow on.
They should dub in Tom Baker now, just do a special edition where he just throws in a line of, and that's why you don't run next to a swimming pool.
Like he just turns to camera again.
He's already done it. He does it so many times in this episode. Yeah, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's how Viscount Bang is. People love breaking the fourth wall.
Perfect. Alrighty. Well, again, once you have heard our commentary today on the Tsuranga Conundrum, please head over to your podcast, your Spotify app, and let us know what you thought of the story.
Yes.
Alrighty.
What did you think? It's a conundrum.
We should get on to the conundrum, but there's actually some stuff going on in the Doctor Who universe right now. So they're making some Doctor Who, as everyone knows. Series 14 with Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. And they have released some photographs of them in full costume for one of their stories. And oh my, are they swinging in the 60s?
So swinging. There's just a rocking hairstyle on Ncuti, and he's wearing a pinstripe blue suit.
Yes.
Somewhat in the style of 10, potentially in the style of 14.
A little bit.
Does he just, after spending another round as David Tennant, is he just really into pinstripes again? Pinstripes are cool.
It could be. I see it's a little winky, certainly, but I mean, he's rocking it. Like, he looks great. She looks great. I like that they're really leaning into they're, I don't know, like they really do look like how they would dress in sort of a swinging 60s kind of way, with this handsome black man and this blonde girl. And they're like, I think I'm glad they're kind of not shying away from going there. You know what I mean? With the big afro and all of this, and you know, why not? I mean, that's basically like how you would look in certain situations in that decade. Go for it.
It does feel like a reboot of the Avengers, almost, by which I mean the UK show, The Avengers.
I got it.
With good old Honor Blackman, and then
Patrick
later with and then in the 70s they had the a reboot again, and maybe it's time to reboot it yet again. But it's almost like Ncuti is so well dressed in all of his outfits and so coordinated. I like the orange and the check coat that is sort of his official garb. Like it's almost hard to believe it's the Doctor, because he's got too much of a sense of fashion. I mean, the Doctor wears sand shoes with a suit. The Doctor wears a multicolored coat that makes his enemies go blind. The Doctor, likes fezzes. I mean, the Doctor's not necessarily noted for his fashion choices over the years. So it's something changed. Okay, Pertwee, but he got a helping hand, as we saw in Spearhead from Space, by just basically stealing the clothes of another Doctor. It wasn't necessarily his choice.
I think we talked about that at the time, and it's almost like that set the template mentally for himself. Like, oh, I'm a James Bond type, and I'm suave, and I do these sort of over-the-top, fancy dress, outlandish stuff. That's what I'm going to do. And maybe that's what they're going for here. I think it's a good choice generally. I think there'd be a hard thing to get right, and I don't want to be too cautious on this, but I also don't want anyone to get the wrong idea in that. Well, you have a young black man, and if you're gonna get them to be dressed awkwardly, does that start to delve into sort of Steve Urkel territory a little too quickly if he's a bit nerdy, right? Like, I think people, you don't want to think too hard about this, because if you overthink it, I think you get results kind of like what. And I think we were a little split on this, but I think you get something like when at the end of Power of the Doctor, I still think they made the wrong choice of regenerating the clothes for the reasons they did. Though I think we'll again figure out what that happens with that story. But I do think they like with RTD and what he said about it, I think he got into his own head a little in trying to get ahead of reactions. And here, I think you can't ignore what the reaction might be, but I'm a little more forgiving of this move. Because I think there's a huge opportunity here to have sort of a stylish Doctor, and we've seen it, like you say, like is this outfit what is supposedly his normal outfit, and we touched on it briefly, but he has that leather coat in one shot. He looks fabulous in all of them. It looks great. I like this idea of a younger sort of, I'm much more sort of stylish, even though I might be sort of internally awkward in some ways, like not really understanding things. But and I'll say one last thing about it. I feel like you've lived for over 1,000 years. You must have learned a thing or two about fashion at some point, dude. Come on. So I'm all for it.
Yes, and maybe we've got the Celestial Toy Maker teaches the Doctor a thing or two about fashion, since it is still my contention that it's the toy maker that has created this suit for the Doctor. He is playing dress up with the Doctor.
Oh, I think it will be. Yeah, I think that'll be the in-show reason for it. I was just sort of more criticizing the out-show reason, which again, I get it. I'm just a little like, I think that sets a bad precedent.
Well, anyway, we will see. But yeah, I kind of like your idea that, the Doctor can actually learn to be fashionable. It does prompt something that perhaps we will make a short trip at some point. This whole question of like who is the Doctor? Like, what can we say about the Doctor, about their personality that is true across all regenerations, right? Are there traits that have lasted through every single regeneration? Is it just sort of the baseline curiosity, or is there more? Is there more sort of quirkiness that we can say has translated down through the years, or is it more a sort of a broom situation, as they talk about in Deep Breath, or a Ship of Theseus situation, if you're familiar with WandaVision. This may be another example of it.
Cool. Well, we're going to find out about a year? I don't know. Maybe a little less. I forget when Series 14 is due to start. I think it's not too far after the new year. But looking forward to it. I love the teases they're doing. And clearly, they're like, again, this is RTD being masterful at what to tease, right? Like these just great visuals, getting us excited for all the things we're going to see in the coming year. Doctor Who's back, baby! Or it will be very soon.
It is back. It will be. We're going to see the pace of these releases pick up a little bit, I think, and looking forward to getting into it again. Looking forward to the generalized excitement of Doctor Who fans on social media, especially as the stuff gets uncovered like a treasure hunt. All right,
okay,
it's time, I think, to exit the feedback loop.
Yep. Bye-bye feedback loop. All right, what happens next? We just start talking about the episode, right? We don't have to do anything before we do that?
That's right. No. Actually, no. Yes, there is. There is TLDW as well, and it is that time of the show where we summarize the story that we're talking about, the episode that we're talking about, in the record time of 30 seconds per classic show. But this is new show, so you get 1 minute, and it is you, Pete. It is your turn.
It is me. Oh my God!
How you feeling? I mean, there's not a whole lot of story, and on the other hand, maybe there's too much story.
There was not a whole lot of story in my head after I watched it. I was like, "What the hell just happened?" I seriously, I'll get into it when we get into it. But I mean, like, I had to read like 2 plot summaries to like prep for this, because I'm like, "What happened again?" Like, huh? Anyway, I'll get through it somehow. Actually, there's surprisingly a lot sort of going on in this one from a on paper standpoint. So this might be hard. So I'm honestly not feeling great, but we'll see.
If you remember my lesson from the TLDW last week, where I did the Doctor's wife, but kind of went over time, because I ended up talking about the scene setting, the characters on the junkyard asteroid, and not enough about the actual plot. So hopefully you will not make the same mistake. But we will find out.
We'll find out.
We will find out with the official Pulse Open summary of the Tsuranga Conundrum in 1 minute, in 3, 2, 1, go.
The Doctor and her companions are on some junk planet. They're looking for something that can counter a sonic mine. It goes off. They wake up on a hospital ship. It's called the Tsuranga, I think. It's a Tsuranga ship. Anyway, it's like they're there. It's 4 days later. They're recovering. They want to get back. But what happens is that this ship is attacked by a small creature. It's called the Pting. And it's really, really dangerous and really, really powerful, even though it's more childlike, and it's eating stuff and it's going for energy sources. It kills one of the doctors by having him go into the escape pod that it was feasting on, and then there's this crisis. They try. There's they need to navigate this asteroid field so they can get back to the medical base really quickly. They have this general who has a heart condition do it, but she dies doing it. At the same time, there's this guy Yas who's he's a male having a baby. Ryan convinces him to be a father because he was going to give up the baby. They all make it bad. They get rid of the Pting by taking the bomb that was going to get set off to destroy the engine, and it gets kicked out, and then they all come back to the medical base, and it's kind of okay, and the guy's going to keep the baby. I think I mentioned that.
Yes, yeah, and they come back and they have a little ceremony for the general. That's where it ends.
They sure do. I think I crammed most of it in there. I missed probably one of the plots. So there's the Pting, there's the general, and there's the baby. There's it's like ABC plot.
Yeah, you got Yos, who's the character who has the baby,
right?
And Astos was the one who's killed in the escape pod. And did you mention the escape pod just sort of randomly?
Yeah, blows up? I did. It sort of blows up. Okay. Where to start? Should we start with a big picture here?
Yes.
I will say this. Okay, you go ahead. You go first.
Obviously, we are not in a TARDIS-heavy episode here. This is one of those episodes where the Doctor loses the TARDIS. But then I kind of... Okay, I'll say a positive thing about the Tsuranga Conundrum first. Maybe our first positive thing of the episode.
Do it.
I like that the Doctor actually cares about losing the TARDIS this time. Is there so many times when, especially in previous regenerations, when the Doctor loses the TARDIS, and they just sort of seem to have this kind of devil-may-care attitude about it. And in this one, the Doctor actually says, no, this is like a super important ship, and it's our home, and I don't like the idea of it being on a junk planet where anyone can come along and pick it up.
Despite perception filters, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But still, maybe it's more at risk in a place where people might pick something up or scoop a whole load of trash up.
Yeah, I'll agree there. There's too many times it's just like whatevs. And although I think for some reason, the one I'm thinking of is oxygen. And I remember them, I think they were more worried about just dying from lack of oxygen, but I do remember them we really got to get back to the TARDIS and we can't.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, that's the point. Okay, listen, here's what I would say about this one. Because you said something positive, I'll counter that. It's very
we will be the matter and antimatter of Tsuranga Conundrum commentary.
It's very apt that this episode begins with the Doctor, Graham, Yaz, and Ryan standing in a steaming heap of garbage. Because that is essentially my review of the Tsuranga Conundrum. I think, and I'll spoiler alert on my rating. This might be the worst episode of Doctor Who I have seen.
Whoa!
Yeah, at least for this podcast.
We were going to get into it, but yeah,
wow. Yeah, it's just bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad. I need to unpack in this discussion why it's bad, because seemingly there are all the ingredients of a Doctor Who episode here, but I think none of them hit well at all, and it all just adds up to a giant nothing burger. I've felt nothing both times I watched it. This is only the second time I've seen it, really. The first time when it was sort of at broadcast or close to broadcast, and I stand by my feeling, and that it was just, what was that? Let's hope the next week's better. It was, thankfully. The next one after this is Demons of the Punjab.
Demons of the Punjab.
It's got a spaceship, it's got mines, it's got the Doctor running around, it's got monsters. Yet all of it seems really confused and doesn't pay off in ways that you want it to. And I could inventory it all, but the Tsuranga Conundrum is a very, very misguided episode. And here's my broad review is that there's nothing wrong with the cast. I think they're all fine. I don't think anyone's really outstanding, but they're all good. I will have some praise for Jodie Whittaker and what she does here. I think she's actually probably the best thing about this episode. But I think, despite,
especially with Jodie and Brett Goldstein. Okay, to say another. To say another positive thing about the Tsuranga Conundrum, this is the only episode of Doctor Who with Brett Goldstein in it. And Brett Goldstein, if you're a Ted Lasso fan, you know him as Roy Kent, the sweary soccer player. And he is very not Roy Kent in this. He's sort of a he's not doing the accent. He's not being a Cockney. He's kind of a bit posh, and he's not kind of leaning it. So Brett Goldstein, I think, since Ted Lasso has discovered that his star is hitched to the notion of being like, you know, hairy and aggressive, and he appears. Spoiler alert! If you haven't seen Thor: Love and Thunder, he's revealed at the end to be Hercules, perhaps in some future movie. So sorry about that, but I feel like I had to share that particular thing. It's one of those end credit sequence where you don't know if this is actually going to turn into a movie or not, like, you know, the Howard the Duck end credit sequence.
Right.
I don't feel like it's a real spoiler. I feel like it's just they wanted to get Brett Goldstein in it somehow. But yeah, it's kind of weird to watch it here, to watch his performance at Astos, because it feels like he's playing Doctor Who character number 2, you know.
Well, that stuff was okay. I didn't mind his scenes. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to finish my thought on the overall, which is that despite all the fine cast and the actually clearly high production values, I feel like this is trying way too hard to be normal Doctor Who. Right? Like, this is Chibnall's first season. I think he's trying to write sort of what he thinks is a normal episodic episode of, you know, set in the future Doctor Who. And it's just so by the numbers. It's just trying so hard to be an everyday episode that it there's no real weight to it, you know, like there's just nothing there.
Trying so hard, I think, is the key here. I think this is Chibnall trying hard to be RTD. And I'll tell you one reason why I think that is the whole situation with Yos, the male alien character who's pregnant. There are a few things that, like, that whole setup, first of all, feels a bit RTD-ish, and I feel RTD obviously would have handled it a lot better. Like, we can talk about what the secret source is of how RTD would have done this, but also, like, specifically that line about where he names the baby. And he's like, "Oh, you, Graham and Ryan, you inspired me to name." And they're like, "Oh, you named it after us?" It's like, "No, I named it after that great Earth hero, Avocado Pear." You know, which is very, very RTD. Definitely puts me in mind of Voyage of the Damned. And is it Mr. Copper in that, who was always getting Earth history wrong? You know,
yeah, something like that, vaguely.
In that sort of very cliched way. Now, let me explain this Christmas thing.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the gag in Time in the Ronnie, where Sylvester McCoy would say phrases like "Time and tide waits for no man," but get them slightly wrong. Time and tide melts the snowman, and it's kind of this juvenile joke that might make you chuckle the first time, but gets really like it's. It's not that clever, and you can see why they dropped it immediately. You know, he doesn't do it at all after that episode. And it's this level of humor. What that is, that avocado pear. It's like, okay, yeah, like you're kind of okay, like that's your reaction. You might chuckle a little bit, but you're like, oh, really? That's the joke. And then you kind of immediately go, is that the joke? I guess. Okay. It's kind of dumb, honestly. Like
it's kind of dumb, but it also feels like another piece of evidence that Chibnall is reaching for RTD here. That he really wants to be RTD, like, and he's looking for the recipe, but I feel like he's looking too intellectually, and he's not sort of feeling the emotion of this, because this is. It's not a great episode. I'll say that straight out. I'll stop trying to say nice things about it. It's not great. It kind of right from the start stops you in a lot of ways. And one of those things is like right from the start. What are we even doing? We're on a junk planet looking for bits of the TARDIS, and the Doctor sort of let them come to the wrong planet, and like right out of the gate, you're kind of annoyed at the Doctor for that, and it's not even annoyed in a Doctor, you old scamp kind of way. It's just like, that was really an error.
What about the sonic mind too? Like, first
Yeah,
of
the
all,
Sonic
I could
Mine
pick.
is
There's a
weird.
lot of things to pick at here, so I've really got to be selective. But I'll just do a quick pick
Yeah.
on the Sonic Mine, which is that what kind of mine do you design that scrambles people's insides but doesn't kill them? This is the problem I have with a lot of this. It's almost like a litmus test I have in science fiction, where it's like, well, if the thing that is the sci-fi version of the real world, everyday modern version is less effective than the real world version, like why is it even a sci-fi thing at all? Like in other words, if that was a conventional mine, they'd just all be dead. That's no question. It's a sonic mine, and they're not. So what is the point of a sonic mine? It just makes no friggin' sense if it's not there to kill people. So there's that. But here, like stepping back on this season and sort of the arcs they have with the characters here, like you think about the second episode where they're kind of like teleported into space, right? Like and they had to be rescued. And this one where there's a sonic mine, but the doctor can't stop it. It actually goes off. Like it seems like Chibnall's trying to emphasize the real danger of this and trying to make it more visceral. And I kind of admire that. But at the same time, there's never any real consequence, right? Like think about and again, it would be a different show, but it would be a bolder choice to say, well, what if one of them actually lost an arm? Or maybe doesn't have to be that much, like lost an eye or something. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer sort of did a little bit of this with the final season when Xander, one of the main characters, actually loses an eye to the big bad, which really helps emphasize like that, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old show, guys, but that it happened. These
that's fine. I like spoilers.
But you can do that. Like here, they sort of, he seems to want to have his cake and eat it too. Like, oh, this is very, very dangerous, but at the end of it, everyone's always okay. And I get, he's trying to be more episodic. It's a different show, and you have to take into account the kids, and it's a family show. That's true, but surely you could do more than just have people wander around and clutch their stomach. And only Jodie Whittaker got that memo. It seemed like everybody else, all the other main cast, are completely fine after the sonic mine, but Jodie Whittaker's the only one who actually shows up for that plot line. Because she, like, again, I have high praise for Jodie Whittaker in this because she's great. She has some good lines, and she understood the assignment of that one. Someone told her early on, you have to, throughout this episode, clutch you're in pain, and she got it. I'll do it for the whole time. I'll do it.
She sort of does it, and it's kind of emphasized at the start. But yeah, you make a good point that it's like things get brought up and then quickly forgotten. Like the TARDIS is back on the planet, that kind of gets quickly forgotten. The TARDIS needed spare parts, that's quickly forgotten. The sonic mine is forgotten. The med tags, why even mention med tags if it's not going to be got so much to get through here. It is a small cast because there are not a lot of extras. But everyone in the cast matters, right? You've got to spend your time in the script getting around to them, explaining them, making them feel real, giving them a line of dialogue that just sort of makes them feel real. And instead, we just get questions at every point, like why have we forgotten about this? Why I was surprised when the Doctor, like, it's supposed to be a reveal that they're actually on a spaceship and not in a hospital.
Yeah,
like I think. Yeah, the first time I watched that, I was like, I assumed they were on the spaceship. It looks like a spaceship.
Well, I also I was waiting for the moment where she opens the door to a massive observatory or some gigantic window, and you get the zoom out of the external of the ship or something. And that just never happens. I mean, like, if you're going to do a big sort of special effects thing, I don't know, maybe that's too cliche and maybe some people are rolling their eyes and I might understand that, but it is like, if you're going to have a big reveal, make it big, make it a big moment somehow. Like, it's just kind of like, oh, okay.
There is a very, very brief, maybe a blink and you miss it kind of moment of pulling back and seeing the ship. But also I just, why was that even a doubt in my mind? What, just because you asked for med tags? No. If it was a hospital, there'd be way more staff walking around these here corridors. It just doesn't feel, and you've got to get over the suspension of disbelief of like the people who are all gathered here together just happen to include like this famous general, right?
Yeah, that was the one that made no sense. Like, why is she even on this ship? Like, I mean, if you have this condition that I guess maybe there might have been a blink and you miss a piece of dialogue that explains it, but it seems like everyone else is sort of in a either urgent or an emergency situation, whereas hers is sort of an ongoing condition. So did she just hitch a ride, I guess? I mean, is that the idea? It's so silly. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, she's just there because she needs to be there. I'm going to get another quick pick in real quick, just because we're talking about the beginning of the show. Okay, if they're out for 4 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan and Graham, they had time to shave, or or did they just get up? I guess the doctor got the worst of it, so maybe they've been up and about for longer and decided to have quickly shave. But would their beards would have grown? So anyway.
That is an excellent point. And I feel like that is too often ignored. The beard growth in science fiction, as time passes, is very, very often ignored. Or maybe it's the fact that Brett Goldstein grew enough stubble for all of them. That's sort of what he does.
It is what he does.
Yeah, it's okay. I will counteract this with another nice thing. We're going to throw in another nice line of dialogue. I like the whole thing about the Book of Celebrants, where the Doctor sort of fangirls a bit about Eve Cicero, this general, and says, "Oh, hey, you're in the Book of Celebrants," and she's like, "That's nothing." But wait a minute, the Doctor. You're in the Book of Celebrants as well, and the Doctor's like, "Oh no, very very common name." Which I think that was a LOL line, and then then she ducks her head back around the door and be like, actually it was more of a volume than a chapter that I was in, which is just that made the Doctor come alive for me in that moment. Yeah, very very Doctorish. It's like no, I'm totally anonymous. I'm just blasting through the universe. Like, don't pay attention to me. By the way, they wrote a whole book about me.
I got to say, like, we can every good thing almost that I have to say about this episode involves Jodie Whittaker. I mean, I think she has, she's given good. She's served well by the script. I mean, clearly Chibnall is really Chibnall wrote this one, of course, and it's his first series. He's really trying to showcase his Doctor. He does a really good job here of that. So I'm going to give episode points for that. I think her stuff with Astos, which is Brett Goldstein. He's really, really great. Like, that dialogue is great, and it has good moments. There's a great moment where she's just desperately trying to either get off the ship, stop the ship, turn around the ship, and he says, "You're going to endanger everyone here. It's my duty to keep them safe, and you're being selfish." And there's everything about that moment is good. The music's good. There's a close up on Jodie Whittaker, and she's just like, "Oh my God, you're right." Like, and she sincerely apologizes, which I think, oh, that's good. That's a good Doctor moment. I like that. And then a little later, when the sort of threat is starting to happen, and by the way, it takes way too long for that threat to happen, because initially, like, there's no real danger, there's no real story. They just want to get back to the TARDIS, and until the Pting sort of shows up, you're just kind of like, okay, what's the story here? And finally, that happens.
Exactly.
And it gives
Pting shows up halfway through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it does give that moment again, another great moment where he's with Astos, where she's like, he's like, "Why am I trusting you?" And she says, "Oh, you're a bad liar, but you have great instincts." It's another very good Doctorish line. She delivers it perfectly. Mm-hmm. It's there's these surprising moments early on, and in a better story, I also like the undermining of that. You're seeing these two get along, start to work together. You're liking both of them, and then it undercuts that by killing them. Which, again, I'm not necessarily slamming that decision. I like the unexpected nature of that, even though the script leaves you wanting more of that. It's like, okay, but the problem is nothing fills that vacuum after that. There's no storyline, character, or some other center other than Whittaker herself. And she's good enough to sort of carry the thing, but it's sort of the through line of the episode just sort of peters out after that. You just don't really have any focus, and then you have these sort of 2 or 3 different storylines that you really just don't care about. Yeah. That was the only relationship I cared about, her and Astos.
Astos is wasted. It could have done so much good in the rest of the episode. And we don't kind of care about the other storylines. But let's talk about the Pting. Let's talk about the threat. God,
I guess we have to.
We have to, and
Yeah.
there's been a deliberate decision here to make the Pting a comic character, whereas the rest of the vibe is kind of horror movie, and it also is a very odd choice, stacked atop a pile of very odd choices, to make it a comedy character. And I don't know. It reminded me of a creature from like a Fantastic Beasts movie. It definitely had that feel to it, and it's sort of cute. Like nobody mentions that it's cute, and they're all kind of horrified
Right?
by it.
Well,
yeah,
I wonder if that decision to make it that cute came later. You know what I mean? Because it's a CGI thing. Obviously, it was mostly done in post. But you're dead on. It's this bizarre choice, and here's where I feel like this is a bad copy of a Red Dwarf episode, which is kind of my way of saying Red Dwarf did this better with the polymorph.
Yes.
And then, again, that was Red Dwarf is always played for comedy, but that idea of something that can be scary in its ability and potentially scary in its appearance, but played for laughs sometimes, I think, it can work. I kind of get what they were trying to do, but whether it was the left hand not really knowing what the right hand was doing in terms of production versus script, or just clumsiness, laziness, like the Pting, you're just like, what you're just confused about. Like, what am I supposed to think here? And I'll get my pick in.
It's supposed to be this ultimate danger, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be. It is kind of renowned, and that there is a brief moment. I don't know if you saw it. That there's like a flash of like a Dalek and an Ood. As they go sort of through the briefing notes to get to the Pting and what it could do to the ship. Like it's supposed to be in that category of character. Like why even bring those up as comparisons if you're going to have this weird cutesy little looking thing?
Well, and this is where my pick is like it makes no physical sense. Like it's shown to be eating things far larger than it.
Yes.
It's like it eats a bomb and it goes off in its stomach and all it does is glow. Now, okay, I will step back and say, like, I understand the super overpowered monsters are not uncommon in fiction, right? Like you can even just look at Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, like you have insane armor and power in some of these godlike monsters. It happens. But I mean, there's some like weight to a story that involves these things, right? It's not just this rando one-off thing that just feels really, really unearned. And this is usually like the big boss, the super boss level monster that can do this kind of thing. Like think about it, like this bomb, like Daleks are powerful, but like a bomb would destroy one, and then that you have to like have these things defeatable on some level. And I guess in this case, there's kind of an interesting intellectual exercise of like, oh, we can't kill it, so what can we do to it? And I guess the idea is, oh, if you give it enough energy, it'll just get tired and have to take a nap or something, which is okay-ish, but I don't know. I'm just at that point, I was just like really taken out of it by the whole thing, many contradictions of the Pting that I just kind of didn't care.
Yeah, on top of the many contradictions of the episode so far, it's just, at a certain point, your suspension of disbelief vanishes, right? You've just been too many contradictions in the story. This definitely qualifies. But the Pting is especially weird to have this cartoonish villain eating an antimatter bomb, basically is what it is. Because what has happened just before is like Doctor Who has done the most, hey kids, let's talk about science moment that I think I've ever seen in the entire show.
Like when Whittaker marvels at the drive. Yeah.
Yes, and Yaz comes in, talks about understanding what CERN is, right? And the Doctor's like, yeah, this is like CERN, but the iPhone version. And it's like, okay, hey kids, let's learn about antimatter, let's learn about positrons. It is all actually good science, as opposed to previous Doctor Who experiments with antimatter, where it's not even really been mentioned. By the way, you would think that the Doctor would mention the one companion that she lost long ago on an antimatter ship that crashed into Earth. especially since Adric's name was derived from I forget the scientist that Adric was named after. It's basically a what it called. You switch around the letters in the name with one of the scientists who first discovered antimatter. So it was a very kind of notable
I don't mind them not
for
mentioning
that reason as
It'd
well.
be a little extraneous.
Yeah. But anyway, so it's clearly an episode that's like, hey kids, you should get into antimatter. This is going to be a thing in your future, and here's what it's going to look like by the 67th century. So to go from that to like we're being super sciencey to an antimatter bomb just exploded in the Pting's cartoonish stomach. It's just it's a tonal mismatch too far.
Well, it's also like at this point in the script, like I do appreciate the idea of grounding us in real science and why this is amazing. Like, in other words, like, Star Trek so rarely does this because they're so casual about their warp drives. But it is like to have the Doctor, who has the perspective of all of history, marvel at the technology and the ability to capture the science in something. I actually don't mind that. I thought that as a standalone moment is good. My problem is that I think it makes no sense from a pacing and script perspective, because we're at this sort of urgent time where there's a Pting and there's the alerts that then the medical base is going to blow up the ship remotely and all this stuff. And she's taken a minute to just like almost put her hands on her hips. Wow, look at this. Oh, everyone stop and think for a second about how great this is. And it's like, I get it. It's a little bit doctorish. It's educational, but it's also like, you should have done that like 20 minutes earlier if you were going to do that at all. Okay. Like it just makes no sense that she's doing this right now. So that was my big issue with it. And then I'm just going to add, like, again, this is picking the Pting again, but I think it merits more because of this contradiction. Like, how could, as powerful as it is, how could it possibly resist antimatter? How could it possibly? It's made of matter, isn't it? Like, it would not antimatter destroy this thing? It might be the only thing that could destroy it, but like, look up antimatter. I mean, you just talked about it. Like, it destroys matter on contact. Doesn't matter what the matter is, whether it's a Pting or a bowl of water, right? Like, it's just going to annihilate it. How can it possibly survive? I'm sorry. I'm just
Well, I will praise the Tsuranga Conundrum for the antimatter thing because we've so recently been to Kill the Moon, which was so resolutely anti-science. Yeah. But like at least but the Pting moment is Kill the Moonish for that reason. Because you put us in a science mindset. So just pick one lane and stick to it. If we're going to be sciencey, let's have a hard science fiction episode, which this easily could have been.
Yeah. So listen,
or if you're going cartoony, don't.
Yeah. So I think we do have to talk about the male pregnancy storyline, which I think needs a preface. And I think I need to preface it like, there's obviously like a lot of culture war stuff about gender issues today. And I feel like this kind of storyline is very difficult to evaluate in that context, right? Like everyone comes to a storyline like that with their own preconceived politics and will have opinions on it, and that's okay. But I think as we think about it, like we really need to sort of make an effort to put that aside and try to judge it on the merits of what it is, right? So what it is, and I missed this the first time, but I'm glad I looked it up because it does soften a little bit of what I just talked about. Yas is explicitly an alien. Now, he doesn't look alien. I think it's called a Gifton or something like that.
Giftan.
And he's an alien, so it's an alien species. They have different pregnancies. They didn't make him look alien. Now, that's not unusual in Doctor Who. The Doctor's an alien and looks very, very human. So here I'm a little not confused. I'm just unsure why they made that call. So if you made him look more alien, I think you would have taken it a little more out of people's sort of headspace in terms of culture war politics. But maybe that obfuscation is the point, so that maybe they did want to do that. I don't know. I don't want to get too into any kind of like, this is why people accuse Chibnall of being woke or whatever, but it does feel a little bit like that. I don't really want to slide into too much of a discussion on that, but it's hard to in storylines like this. So I'll stop there on my preface into it. I want to get your thoughts on that, and then let's just evaluate the structure of the storyline itself.
Yeah, two problems with Yas, the gift hand. First of all, it's not just that they make him look human; it's that they make him look like Ed Sheeran, which is just could not shake that image from my head. Ed Sheeran is pregnant. Oh my god! But also, like they kind of cop out at the end when he's giving birth, where they explain that it's basically a C-section.
Right.
So we're saying that that's normally how male pregnancies are delivered.
Well, in this species,
with
I guess.
gift hands, like it just. Yeah, and there's this whole thing about the sac, the belly has no like pain centers, so they can slice right open. But like, is that how evolution designed them to slice each other open to get their male children out? Like, it's a nice touch that males only give birth to males, females only give birth to females, and like Gifthand has a little bit of sort of blinkered almost racism of his own, right? Of like, what you don't like men don't give birth to men on your planet? That's weird. Which I thought was a nice touch, a nice sort of commentary on like, we sort of just don't really, So it's obviously it is a vehicle for Ryan to talk about his issues with his own dad. But that, again, gives us another moment that kind of stops the action, where Ryan just sort of stops in the middle. Is it where they're trying to find the Pting, and he just suddenly stops and has a discussion with Yaz about his issues with his father?
Yeah, which is a good scene. My problem is I think that should have been handled differently, because he essentially says maybe one, maybe two things to Yas, and suddenly Yas is down, reasonably down, I guess, for being a dad. And again, I don't like where that goes, because one, even though I think it is a good storyline structurally for Ryan, I want, you want him to sort of make some peace with himself and then try to do some good in the world with his sort of the wisdom that he's found from that. I would like him to do that in front of the character it matters to, which is to say Yas, right? Like he has this discussion with Yaz in the hallway when it's like, I think that would have been way better handled if he has the discussion with Yas and allow Yaz to watch it so that Yaz can thus have that connection. But it actually makes much more sense in the storyline that Yas comes around based on Ryan really being vulnerable and authentic with him. That would have been good. In this case, they sort of separate them out, and you're just kind of like, it's much less than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, and not only does that sort of waste time in an episode that has no time to spare, like too many storylines to follow, too many people to introduce, etc., etc. But it also, it doesn't seem in character for Ryan, who's like kind of a little bit reticent with his TARDIS crew. Like we saw Revolution of the Daleks, his last story. The fact that he just couldn't talk to them or the doctor about like how he didn't want to travel on at that point. Like, that's sort of part of his deal. And we've talked about Ryan's story arc. We've seen the episodes that serve him really well, right? Rosa and the Witchfinders. He definitely appears a lot better on a kind of second viewing of these episodes. This one, Tsuranga Conundrum, I think points out how Ryan was ill-served and his storyline was ill-served by Doctor Who as well. Because there's definitely a storyline here, and it is obviously followed through in Resolution, his whole relationship with his dad, how complicated it is. And it just doesn't have room to breathe in this. And the way that talking to Yaz about it is a strange choice, because he's supposed to be kind of like, he's a little bit sweet on Yaz in some of these episodes, or like, he kind of he's reticent about talking about anything in front of her that kind of makes him look bad, so this doesn't Dumbly, this is a waste of time. It's a waste of a scene. It stops the action in the middle of what is supposed to be action. And as you say, much better served if he just said it all to Yaz. And then he would have that revelation himself in that moment, that it's reminding him of his father. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And that's what how I think RTD would have done it. And that's the magic formula that Chibnall's looking for. And he just keeps getting in his own way.
Yeah, and it does not help that it's the B plot, and you kind of inherent. Like, I don't really care about any of the plots at this point in the story, but I mean that you sort of, at least you're a little bit invested in what happens with the Pting, and I think it's just not served well that he's just kind of sidelined, and that is kind of a interesting side effect of the pregnancy storyline, which is that it sidelines Ryan and Graham. And I listened to the commentary on this one on the Blu-ray, and I think it was Nikki Wilson, one of the producers, who pointed out the sort of what she sort of thought, I think, was a clever reversal of what it does is it sidelines the male characters who are now have to help deliver a baby, and then the female characters have to sort of solve the immediate action problem and plot. Again, I guess there's again, I don't want to get too political about anything, but it's like, depending on your politics, you might think that's really satisfying, or you just might think it's just a fact. And it's like, okay. And it is just a fact. Ultimately, even if you do have this reversal, doesn't make any of those storylines good. Like, it's just, the girls are doing one thing and the boys are doing another. And here's what I would also argue. I would say that in most fiction, beyond even just science fiction, this isn't actually going against expectation. Usually, the whole point of a sort of emergency pregnancy and to make it interesting is to get sort of a fish out of water thing. And I can certainly think of times I've seen male characters that need to deliver a baby because the preconceived notions of what the audience expectations are. That's definitely happened. Like, just off the top of my head, like Worf in Star Trek The Next Generation has to deliver Keiko's baby in an episode. And it's like, oh, wow, he's just this stoic person, the Klingon with no, bedside manner. And he's got like, oh, that's kind of funny. And it's like, okay, fair enough. A little bit is. It kind of worked. But I feel like that happens a lot, like I don't think this is undermining much in the way of expectations. It's just, it's just a thing, that it's a trope almost at this point.
And talk about undermining expectations. I mean, we've just been talking about all these areas where Chibnall is like, almost arguing against himself or like having weird tonal changes. A weird thing happens to me. I know it was supposed to be a joke that Graham has watched every episode of Call the Midwife. And so he thinks he's ready to be a midwife, but then he like can't actually stand looking at this. Like, how did he think that was going to go when he made that proud boast? Like, that just doesn't ring true to me at all. If you're going to bring up the Call the Midwife thing, have it mean something, not just that Graham is a hypocrite, I guess, or doesn't know himself. Like, what is even the joke here?
Yeah, it reminded me of that moment in Orphan 55 where he jokes about his Speedos, which actually does work just because it's so funny. It's a really funny joke. But here, it's not as funny, and it's just Graham putting in the line because the script needs someone to say the line, and it doesn't seem to really fit with the character. You're just like, okay, I guess he did that thing, and watch that show because there's a thing here that demands we retroactively put this into Graham's history. Okay, sure. Yep.
Yeah, why not? But yeah, you're absolutely right that science fiction is just way ahead of the game on this, and like it really could have been. It didn't subvert expectations at all. Like we've been, when was The Left Hand of Darkness, the Ursula Le Guin book where characters change gender throughout? That was like late 60s. Like we've had this trope for a long time. Of alien races, like, gender can be different, sex can be different, pregnancy can be different. It's absolutely not upending expectations at all. And I feel like this didn't, maybe Chibnall thought he was going to piggyback on some culture war stuff by having this scene, and instead it's just sort of like, oh yeah, man is pregnant. Okay, got it.
Well, and I'll say it again. Red Dwarf did it better, and again, different era.
Yep.
Culture War was not really concerned with this kind of stuff. But when Lister has his twins and gets pregnant and stuff, it's like that was funny and subverting expectation and doing lots of interesting things with it. Honestly, whereas here it's
I'm glad you brought up Red Dwarf because I think you're right. Thinking about it, this is an excellent example of like Red Dwarf knows how to do comedy, obviously, but they also know that to play off against the comedy, the science fiction has to be kind of serious. It has to be like almost a serious science fiction threat in every episode. And what I love about Red Dwarf, I love the early seasons especially because you do sort of feel the problem of being like trapped on a ship that's nearly at light speed, and you get the sort of the weird time dilation issues.
Oh yeah.
And, the future echoes and stuff like that. It always had a kind of a, sad kind of lonely space vibe to me.
Totally.
It was almost accentuated by the comedy, right? Because the comedy there always felt like a bit of like laughing in the darkness. And then, once they introduced Crichton, I feel like it got a bit too madcap sitcom.
Got a little more sitcom-y for sure.
Yeah.
No, Red Dwarf, Red Dwarf knew what it was doing. I mean, that's the thing. It knew what it was doing, where I think this story very clearly does not. It doesn't know if it wants to be a comedy, doesn't know what storyline to focus on, doesn't really know how to make these characters resonate. I think it's pretty telling. We've barely talked about the brother of the great general. I don't even know if we mentioned until now. Well, and her, the general's android assistant. So a couple of characters that are in the episode, but only sort of superficially. Like I'll start with the android because the criticism's easier. So the android, I don't know why they chose to have him be an android. Ronan. It seems to me the only reason to make this character an android is to challenge the actor not to blink. There's no moment whatsoever where the fact that the character is an android is used in an interesting way, like that some feat of superhuman strength, some feat of superhuman computation ability, the ability to say remove a limb or something like that could be useful in some situation. There is a mention made of like, I forget what it is even, but like the Pting either isn't or is attracted to him because he's an android or whatever. I don't think that's even really used, because the point where they pull out the stasers, and why did they say stasers, by the way? Why reuse the name of the weapons of Gallifrey? I don't know why you would do that. Chris Chibnall, are you a fan or aren't you? Okay, but aside from that, like, I don't think he really does anything. Like, it's just a completely wasted character and wasted idea that he's an android.
And we get thrown in at the end. We get Durka sort of, who's the brother of Durka Cicero, apologizing to Ronan for like we've just learned that Ronan is going to get deactivated, which might be the first thing that we care about him, but it's suddenly thrown in at the end. And then Durka's like, I'm sorry, I was a bit mean to you. And the android's like, yeah. And then the android kind of leads this ceremony where they all kind of repeat the words for this character we don't really care about. Like, it's so weird a choice. Like, it's almost like Chibnall had to pack it. He's like, oh, I haven't mentioned these characters much. Let's pack in some attempted emotional wallop right there at the end. But by that point, you just don't care.
Yeah, I totally didn't care.
Like,
and
like the android's getting deactivated, but he gives the benediction. I guess, weird choice.
Why are they deactivating the android? Like, do they not recycle in the 67th century? Like, also, this is the thing. I mean, again, I don't think every single piece of science fiction that features androids and robots has to go into existential examinations like the way Star Trek is done with Data and whatnot. If you're thinking about it, like, is he sentient or isn't he? And if he is, then I don't think that's a good thing to do. And if he isn't, fair enough, but have some more implication of a little more world building here of what that is and how that means, what it means to the characters. So moving on to the brother a little bit, Durkis, again, I had very little to say about him because I didn't really follow what his issues were. And the only thing that really strikes me about his whole storyline is that he takes over for his sister at the end, which gets me to wonder, well, why didn't you just do the whole thing in the first place? Right. So she didn't have to have a heart attack and die. I I guess I could sort
It's super weird.
maybe it's mentioned, maybe there's some head. I could, maybe the asteroids got easier as you got through them, but it's also like, if it was that
It's the
easy, like what's
reverse.
going on?
It's the reverse of Asteroids, the video game, where it gets easier in later levels. The number one weird decision with Durkas, the brother, is to dress him in essentially 21st century clothes,
Right?
or late 20th century. Like, which is, we're supposed to be in the 67th century here. He, for some reason, is the only character who's like in jeans and a shirt. So visually, it reads as if he's come from our world, but there's no, like, if you're going to do that, throw in a line about how he just, and you always wear those really old fashioned, clothes or something.
He's super
like
retro.
Yeah, like have that be an actual plot point that's mentioned, or don't do it. Like, have him dress 67th century. And by the way, why the 67th?
Yeah.
I do like the Doctor throwing in the whole sort of potted history of the 67th century of, gets a bit rough in the middle, all turns out all right in the end.
Yeah.
I do kind of have a historical theory that all centuries get a bit rough in the middle, which doesn't go well for us. But
don't jinx it.
Yikes! I know, right? come back to me in the 2030s. We'll see where we're at.
According to Kill the Moon, it gets really dicey in the middle. So,
yeah. But yeah, why 67th? Why not 50th? The Doctor loves the 50th or the 51st centuries.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if this was an attempt. Again, Chris Chibnall apparently just made it up as he went along, so I don't know if he had any plans here. I don't mind the idea of saying, like, okay, I'm going to put a stake in the ground on another future era because I want to do completely different things than what we've already established the 50th century is. That's okay, except he never comes back to this, right? Like, if you're going to world build, like, use the world you're building. I think maybe it was like this. I know, we're doing it now. We're giving this episode such bad reviews that maybe he just decided to abandon it and do other stuff. Anyway, the issue is, there's again with the way Chibnall approached the show, apparently just making it up. He didn't have a world of his own, whatever it is that he really wanted to flesh out, apart from a couple of storylines like the Timeless Child.
Yeah, I am starting to wonder about Chibnall, and what I'm starting to wonder is kind of a thing I would never normally say about a writer, but this episode in particular, and as we're going through it, thinking of all the threads that have been dropped and the weird decisions made. Does Chibnall do second drafts? Or third drafts or fourth drafts? Does he even have the concept? Or is it that he's Ed Wood? Like, know,
one take Chibnall
from the great movie. Exactly. One take, cut, print it. It's beautiful. It's great. But like with his own scripts.
Yeah.
Is that the thing? Is he just not, does he not have the faculty of being self-critical enough about his own early drafts? Because it is kind of like when you if you give this script a close read, these problems have got to pop out at the script stage, surely.
Yeah, all I can speculate, it's all speculation. You sort of look at Broadchurch and you think, okay, that was great. He could clearly handle complex characters, a long storyline, all this stuff. But here, either he's making deliberate choices not to do that and sort of challenging himself as a sort of a creative exercise to do something much more episodic and much more seat of the pants. Or, again, all speculative. I don't know anything about behind the scenes stuff on Broadchurch, but did he just have a lot of help on Broadchurch? Did he have someone who was getting him to stick to deadlines and making him do those second drafts and thinking more about the world he was building? Maybe. I don't know. But clearly he either didn't have that help here, or if he did, he chose to deliberately do something much more fragmented. Or
maybe it's the science fiction that ties him up. It's Like Broadchurch is great because it has no science fiction elements to it, right? He can just totally focus on the story and the characters and developing this plot line with having to throw in these concepts. And that does seem to stop him. Like let's throw in an antimatter speech here. Let's throw in a sonic mine there. Let's, sci-fi concepts are whizzing past my ears. Let's shove them all into the script. And that worked for Moffat. Surely it'll work for me. Again, he sort of feels like he's taking the science fictionness from Moffat, the throw in tons of concepts, and the attempt at sort of science fiction comedy from RTD, like clearly drawn characters from RTD. And he's not really succeeding on either front.
No, and if anything, our discussion here, I think, is showing is science fiction is hard, man. Like, I think it's too often thought like, oh yeah, you can just put in some silly costumes and you can kind of do whatever you want and just make it up because who knows what the future is. And it's like, actually, it is entirely not that simple. And you actually have to think more about the strange worlds. You can do strange stuff, but it has to make some kind of sense in whatever world you're trying to build. And that is harder because you can't fall back just on the familiarity of the real world and the universal language that we all have of encountering it. You've got to build all of that on your own in your story, and it has to make some kind of logical sense within that story. And at some point, that got all disrupted in this story and arguably in his era.
Yeah, and if you can't even manage a logical consistency within a story, at least logical consistency within a scene. At least let's start with that. Maybe we can sort of just take it scene by scene and watch it in the way that I had to watch Kill the Moon, which is 5 minutes at a time, and then we'll forget the previous scenes. We'll not notice the inconsistencies.
Speaking of inconsistencies, did you think that I didn't even catch this? I had to read it in a plot summary. They talk about the teleport that they're going to use to get back to that planet.
Yeah,
which makes you think, well, could you not have teleported from that planet and just gone to the medical base in the first place? Why did we even have to have a story? Like,
And it wasn't entirely clear that the teleport was going to work to take the Doctor back to the junkyard planet. Like, is it that specific? Can it? And
well, that's what I thought it was.
Like, if it can,
if it can do that, and you're doing this,
beam you across space.
Like, why aren't people just doing that? Why do ships even exist? It's like, like pretty cool technology there, 67th century, but kind of undermines the entire script. Oh, should we?
The whole, the whole problem with teleports, which we won't even get to. The destruction of the body and the recreation at the other end, etc., etc. But yes, I think we're done tearing apart the Tsuranga.
Yeah, unfortunately, we still have questions. And those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question. Why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, there's the junkyard connection.
Right. Easy.
It definitely took us from a good junkyard episode to a bad junkyard episode. But also, I'm going to mention a very weird connection, which suggests that this may not have been for us after all. Which is that my wife and I we watch Ted Lasso, and after watching the episode this week, my wife went and looked up Brett Goldstein on Wikipedia. She was curious about him, and it notes that he was in Doctor Who, and she was curious about which episode he's in. Didn't actually have the time, as we don't have time for all of our Google searches. It was just a thing tickling at the back of her brain. And so as she happens to be standing in front of the TV, as I fire up the Tsuranga Conundrum, she didn't want to watch this one, by the way, which is kind of telling.
Even with Brett Goldstein. Oh, man.
Even with Brett Goldstein. But he's there in like the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So like that's all she needs to know. She's like, okay, job done, problem solved. Yeah. So I would like to suggest that the randomizer somehow she tapped into. Oh, and by the way, this was on 420, which is highly celebrated here in the Bay Area. So she feels she may have pierced sort of the time-space barrier in her mind and kind of gone back in time and changed the randomizer's decision about where to send us, specifically so she could have this question answered. So a little bit scared that the randomizer is being used by other people. But hey, you listeners could maybe use the randomizer as well if there's something you're wondering about. What Doctor Who episode did X happen in? Just think really hard, or to quote Amy Pond, wish really hard. at the randomizer, and it will take us there next.
That all makes sense. I definitely had the junkyard connection as well, junkyard to junkyard. The other thing is that, as you recall, I asked for a TARDIS heavy episode 2 times ago. Took us to the Doctor's Wife, the most TARDIS heavy episode you could possibly do. I think this might be simply recoiling at the TARDIS presence from that one and saying like, okay, let's do something with the TARDIS basically absent.
Very TARDIS light from actually, the Doctor who has lost the TARDIS the most.
Yeah, I can't even remember. Do you even see the TARDIS in those early scenes? Is it like in the background or something? Yeah. Okay. So at least you see it for a second.
Very opening scene, and then you see it, and you pan down to the junkyard, and then you don't see it again.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, very TARDIS light. Okay. TARDIS light. Moving on
and
to
it's
this.
a light TARDIS without the parts that they're trying to find at the TARDIS as well. So it's another thing. We know that the randomizer loves episodes where TARDIS parts are lost or taken out or removed, and we've been to Time Flight and Frontiers and all of that. The randomizer loves it when the TARDIS is stripped to bits.
Well, that might be why they went to this junkyard, because of the stuff he jettisoned in The Doctor's Wife. He maybe got rid of an old storage room with a lot of spare parts. And it's like, oh, well, we gotta fill that up again. All right.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a not an evil plot. That's kind of a mundane plot. But what if the evil plot in this episode had succeeded? Okay, so what's the evil plot?
Okay,
Is it got to be the Pting, right? I mean, right? So the Pting, I mean, this is pretty straightforward, isn't it? It just eats the ship. And then we're done. Everybody dies.
Yes, it eats the ship, everybody dies in the cold vacuum of space. But it's not even an evil plot. I would say this episode does not have an evil plot. The Pting's just being a Pting, man.
Yeah.
It's just trying to live. It's just doing its Pting thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's not evil. Is there anyone who is evil? I mean, the brother's kind of a jerk, but he's not evil.
He just cares too much. The general's kind of a strung out person, but needs adrenaline blockers. But so what? Yeah, nobody's bad.
I suppose whoever left the sonic mine was an evil person, and that was an evil plot, and it did succeed. The sonic mine went off, and it scrambled the insides of the people that it was close to. So
maybe the evil plot is Yoss's plot to give away his baby.
Sounds a little judgmental to consider that evil.
I guess.
Nah, I think I have to go with the Pting. It's very straightforward. They all die, and that honestly, the straightforwardness of the evil plot succeeding here, I think, is indicative of just how lame the overall story is. It's like, okay,
yeah. But we can speculate on whether the Doctor then regenerates in the cold of space.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, my view in that is that she just dies. I mean, because you can only you just keep regenerating until you run out, because who's coming to save you? Unless it's like one of those ghost monument situations. But
Yeah. Evil plot succeeds. A Doctor Who ends not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Okay, moving on to question 3. Where is the Clara Splinter?
Yes.
Got a theory on this?
Clara Oswald splintered in time at the end of the Name of the Doctor.
I guess we should explain.
You know the deal with
You know
Clara
the story.
She's in every episode.
She's in every, even though Name of the Doctor is chronologically in the past at this point, we do like to imagine she's splintered forward as well, because why wouldn't she be? Throughout the Doctor's timeline is throughout the Doctor's timeline. It is what it is. So she's got to be here somewhere, even though the cast is really, really small.
She's off screen somewhere. I think this particular Clara Oswald has been selling Hamilton tickets to the Doctor. Making a tidy profit, because of course we get a mention of Hamilton for the first and I believe only time in Doctor Who history, because Yaz comes up with the number of 51, happens to be the number of Federalist Papers that Hamilton wrote. As we all know from the show, Hamilton wrote the other 51, as Burr shouts at some point. So the Doctor says she's seen all 900 casts, so I got to think Clara Oswald is some sort of time travel theater agent who just will sell you a block book ticket to like, here are your tickets to all 900 casts of Hamilton.
Yeah. Well,
probably ignoring that there's a 901st somewhere. Like, no, 900. We'll just stop there.
Putting aside rule 1, I mean, even the Doctor, are you just like a super fan of Hamilton? I mean, have you seen other shows that many times, like Les Mis or whatever? That's a lot of times. That's a lot of time in the theater.
Although I have to say, around about this time, 2 years before this episode aired in 2016, I was so super into Hamilton, I would have done that. I would have seen all 900 casts. I had a serious Hamilton addiction in the early days.
You and my daughter have a lot to talk about next time you drop by. Yeah, my daughter loves Hamilton. She's super into it. We actually went to see it on Broadway finally as a family.
I love it.
A few months ago, and it was amazing. She had a great time.
We'll do Hamilton karaoke next time.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that.
The room where it happened. So my theory is that Clara is basically keeping scavengers away from the TARDIS on the junk planet so that it's there waiting for them when the Doctor comes back. And I'll just sort of, again, I this is probably an unfair slam on the episode. I think almost everything we said already is been fair. But this one I will just throw in for good measure in that there's a missed opportunity that just by having to be a teleport. And I felt sort of this way also in the Ghost Monument, like this idea of like, oh, the TARDIS is missing and we got to hunt for it and spend probably some time and some adventures doing that isn't bad. I wouldn't have minded seeing sort of like not really a part 2 to this, I guess, but like another story where they have to go back and something's happened to the TARDIS, someone's taken it, and there's a whole story about getting the TARDIS back, and I don't know, whatever it is, make up whatever you want. Maybe it's a poker game, maybe it's something even more elaborate, who knows, but that could be a fun thing to do, and instead we just go right to Demons of the Punjab. Now that said, yes, do the stories that you want to do, but I do feel like twice in this season they miss an opportunity to do something a little bit fun with clear stakes, and they just didn't bother.
Yeah, it would be hard to do another TARDIS Lost episode so soon after Ghost Monument. I'm sort of counting Ghost Monument as barely that in some ways, though. It seems like that's what they were trying to do with teasing it in The Women Who Fell to Earth, and then I feel like the Ghost Monument really didn't pay it off. But yeah, I guess that's fair in that you wouldn't do it twice, but I would say like in both cases, in one case it doesn't really work, and in the second case they just don't do anything. I don't know. Maybe that again. I did preface it. It's probably an unfair criticism, but I like that idea of like this. The basic structure of the show is now further than an arm's length away from me, and that becomes a problem I have to solve. I think they could mine that again at some point. Go for it, Shooty. Go for it. RTD. Call me. Yeah, absolutely. We did actually mention this last week, right? The notion that they could go Red Dwarf and kind of just lose the TARDIS for a whole season. Pretty cool idea. All right. Well, I think it might be time to deliver our verdicts.
Yep, it is time now.
What's the fourth question?
The final question, the only question that matters to the Tsuranga Conundrum. What did we think of it? The Pull to Open rating system has 5 ratings. There is the Dalek, which we reserve for a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we reserve for a not-so-good episode of Doctor Who. Professor Hater, which is a not-so-good episode, but at least they tried something, at least we learned something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. And the rarely used, although recently used, Fixed Point in Time, where it is an episode we simply cannot rate, usually for reasons of nostalgia, but sometimes for other reasons. As was the case with the Doctor's wife, with one of us. So I'll go first this time because I think it will surprise absolutely no one who's been listening for the past hour or so that I'm rating this a big, stinky Ogron. I think it might be the worst episode of Doctor Who ever made. I really just don't care about any of it. Again, I had a few things to say that were nice about Jodie Whittaker and some of this stuff early on and some of the choices she made. But considering I watched it twice, 3 times if you count the commentary, and I still had to read plot summaries to fill in big parts of the plot to understand. No, I don't think I'm dumb. I hope people don't think I'm dumb. It's mostly just because I did not care. Stuff was, yes, it was coming fast and furious and stuff's whizzing by you, but I just didn't care. I don't care what the android's doing. I didn't care what the brother's doing. Everything was just so either by the numbers or just bad. I did not like it. No, would not recommend Ogron.
I don't. I would agree with you. I think it is an Ogron. I don't think it's the worst episode of Doctor Who ever made. I think that might be a contender, and perhaps we take a side trip at some point to figure out what that is. But it's definitely an Ogron. It doesn't try anything really new here.
Right.
Even though it might think it's doing that with a male pregnancy, it's not really new. As you say, Red Dwarf did it like 20 years earlier. It just it's not notable. It's not reaching for something. There's no redeeming Professor Hayterness to this. Sorry, Chris Chibnall. You've got to go back to the drawing board. I don't think you ever have to apologize for like not picking up the plot on something because, as you say, it's about emotional investment. And if we're not if we don't care enough to pick up what's going on here on multiple viewings, something is wrong with the script. And I've read a few sort of takes on this that say, oh, it's kind of, it was okay. Like it was, but nobody like flat out loves it. There is no Tsuranga Conundrum fan club out there. It just doesn't exist. And I did, since we had the folks since we had Dave on from the Doctor Who show last week, I went back and listened to what they had to say about the Tsuranga Conundrum, and it was that they, they'd got like 15 minutes in and they didn't hate it. It was like the mildest compliment that they had on that show for the Tsuranga Conundrum, and that is the best part of the. I can say about it too is like I didn't really hate it that much. Like I was able to swallow it in one bite. How about that?
That's very Pting centric review, and we'll take it. Yeah. The first 15 minutes is the best part, and it's still not great. All right. We're going to have to regurgitate the Tsuranga Conundrum, and then once we're done that, we are going to pack into our time ship and activate the randomizer to find out where we're going next.
That's right.
Guys, the randomizer is composed of 2 parts. First is the Pull to Open Codex, which I have open in front of me. It is a spreadsheet of every single episode of Doctor Who in sequential order. But we have to introduce the random element to find out where we are going next time. And that random element you have control of, do you not, Chris Taylor?
That's right. It is played by random.org, which is a website that uses atmospheric noise, not algorithms, to create randomness. And it is true randomness and very doctorish randomness to use. Atoms bouncing around the atmosphere. Whether or not there are any positrons involved in random.org's calculation, we don't know. But nevertheless, it gives us a true random number, and I will enter into random.org, also known as the Executor, the maximum number based on the number of episodes and stories of Doctor Who that we have left. Pete, what is the magic number this week?
The magic number is 221.
Oh, yes, we've crossed the 222 barrier. As Dave said last week, 222 is the Australian cricket commentator way of saying it. But we are now on 221, So, yes, let's give the randomizer some challenges, even though we're not really in control. We'd like to say, please, Mr. Randomizer, could you take us to... And Pete, what do you got this week?
So this was in the future, and even though I'm usually want to do the opposite, so take us to the past, I'm actually going to say this picture of the future was not good. Take us to a better version of the future, please, Mr. Randomizer. That's what I'm going for.
I'm going to say perhaps something that could dovetail with that is give us more antimatter. There are a lot of well-known episodes of Doctor Who, stories in Doctor Who, that have antimatter as part of the plot. The Three Doctors is one. Earthshock is another. Antimatter gets mentioned in both those. I'm sure there are others.
Well, we did Planet of Evil already, which was perhaps the most antimatter-centric for all of them. So we can't do that. Yeah. But I'm sure that I'm sure it'll come up.
Let's make progress on our antimatter bingo, please, Mr. Randomizer. So yes, Pete, give me a countdown. I will hit the generate button, and we'll find out where we're going next week.
And we find out in 4, 3, 2, 1.
No, not the mind probe.
38. We have gone early.
Very early. 38. Oh.
Uh-oh.
The War Games.
Oh, we hit it. We did it. The crisis is upon us. It's happened, ladies and gentlemen. As you know from listening to Pull to Open's Passim, we have been afraid of the War Games. We're afraid of the Daleks' master plan. Obviously, Flux. These super long stories. This will be, I guess, the third longest story in Doctor Who history, since we know Flux is now the first.
Here's the thing. Okay, look, this is like our fifth. Is it our fifth? It's our fourth. It's our fourth Troughton episode. How are we hitting the War Games on the fourth time we go to Troughton? There's like 16, 17 other stories. We hit the War Games? Really? The longest one, the 10-episoder. That's what we're going. You, Randomizer, are taking us to this. This is not a better vision of the future. This is not a better vision of Pull to Open future. Let's pace ourselves. The War Games? Really? I'm kind of mad at the Randomizer. I think the Randomizer is punishing me for being so hard on the Tsuranga Conundrum. It's like, you were mean, and you now have to sit down and watch hours and hours of television to prepare for your next episode of Pull to Open. Take that, Paschal.
Well, I will say this. I'm actually quite pleased, and because we had to hit it eventually.
Yeah.
And I've not seen the War Games.
Wow, look at that.
I've seen the end. Everyone has seen the end of the War Games where Troughton starts to regenerate and does his gurning face. But I've not seen it itself, and I'm kind of, obviously always been intimidated by the length of it. But also, like, it seems to, the longer time goes on, the more it seems to be venerated as Troughton's best, and perhaps one of the best stories in all of Classic Who, maybe in all of Doctor Who itself. So I'm accepting this fate willingly.
It's interesting you say that, and actually reminded me of something, because I recently received my most recent Doctor Who magazine. And this one is showing the first results, the initial results of the poll they're doing this year for the 60th anniversary.
Oh yeah.
And they did release the results for the first and second Doctor eras, and you're dead on. The War Games is now ranked number 1 according to fans.
Wow.
Followed closely by Tomb of the Cybermen, and it was in that same position in 2014, the last time they did this poll. So it is really well remembered. I've seen the War Games. I've actually seen it more than once, but long, long ago. In other words, like, I found it compelling enough as a kid to go back and watch it at least once, maybe even twice, way back when I was in junior high or high school. So there's stuff to really like about it. It's been a while, but so don't get me wrong. I'm really looking forward to enjoying this episode again, but 10 episodes. It's just, I've got to.
10 episodes.
It's funny. We were talking even before we recorded today about like time we need to devote to TV and on the podcast. And it's like, It's like the randomizer hears all our conversation, is just playing with us, you know?
Does. It really does. And you know what else? In my run-up, I said, and I kind of realized as I was saying it, I said, let's see where we're going next week. And I think we know quite clearly we have a lot going on in the coming week. I don't think we can watch this all in 1 week. Sorry,
I
guys.
think we're going to stretch out. That doesn't necessarily mean, dear listener, you will not have Pull to Open to listen to, and perhaps some of those interesting short trips or sidesteps that we talked about a little earlier. But the War Games, we got to give it room to stretch out. So
that's right.
Come on back.
It's due. But also, yeah. I think we've also established that the randomizer reads Doctor Who magazine, so I'm glad to hear that there is that connection as well.
Just got really excited by that poll. I was like, we got to do it. We got to do War Games.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do War Games, so come on back next time, or perhaps the time after that, for our full take on the War Games. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing. In case you haven't, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you are subscribing on a podcast app and you don't subscribe on YouTube, why don't you go over to YouTube and set a subscription there? It's really going to help the show. Obviously, we are available all over where you can find podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, all the good stuff. Please share the podcast with a friend. We're probably available on whatever platform they like. Thank you, Martin West, for our music, which is rocking. And hey, for you fans who may not have left a review yet, please do that. Follow us on the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pull to Open 63, TikTok, Pull to Open. And we will talk to you next time or very soon to take apart the War Games.
All right. Take care, everyone. See you then.